you not entertained?
Yes, sir! We'll have a real good time!
He's Dave, and I'm Dallas, and this is Vintertainment. We have opinions on just about everything. Sometimes those opinions are spot on. Sometimes they go down easier with a glass of wine. This is Vintertainment, the wine and entertainment pairing podcast.
Welcome back to another wine and entertainment pairing for your Vintertainment. This is, of course, the podcast where we pair wine with entertainment. It is as simple as that. We always know what we like or dislike, but we rarely know why. So what better way to learn about that than by comparing different wines to different types of entertainment and compare how they both hit us and affect us the way that they do. I'm Dave, your WSET Level 3 wine professional.
And I'm Dallas, a professional writer and world builder. And now, for the answer to last week's wine trivia question. The question was, which white wine grape shares a parent with Pinot Noir? AKA, they both come from the same parent grape. Is it A, Chardonnay, B, Sauvignon Blanc, C, Riesling, or D, Muscat of Alexandria? And the answer is, of course, A, Chardonnay.
Woo, yes. The parent grape of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir is just called Pinot. Just Pinot, no Noir, no nothing else after it. It is an ancient grape, a parent variety that no longer exists, but created Pinot Noir, which is the best known of the red skin varieties that this parent Pinot created. Pinot Gris, aka Pinot Grigio. If you ever see Pinot Grigio, that is the Italian name for the grape. If you ever see Pinot Gris, Gris, but not Gio as well, that is the same grape. The Italians just call it Grigio, and everyone else just calls it Gris. And that is a grape with multi-hued pigments within it. And that is a different species than Pinot Noir. But then Pinot Blanc, which is the white skin version, that is a mutation of either Pinot Noir or Pinot Gris. We're not sure. But it's one of those two. It is not its own grape variety. The DNA isn't different enough. It could be, it shares enough of the same DNA with Pinot Noir and Pinot Gris that it could be a mutation of either or. We don't know, but Pinot Gris and Pinot Noir, we do know, are their own separate variety, which is kind of rare because most of the time when it comes to grapes that are Noir, Gris, or Blanc, which just sort of defines the color of its skins, Gris is a gray skin, usually a multi-hued skin. Blanc, obviously white, and Noir, obviously red. The Italians, if you ever get a Pinot Nero, that is a Pinot Noir as well. They just call their red grapes Nero. Those are usually mutations of each other, technically by DNA, the same grape. But fun fact, grapevines are genetically unstable. So they mutate frequently and create red and white and gris or gray skin versions of the same variety all the time. That's why there are Grenaches and then Grenache Blancs and Grenache Gris and so on. And the full name of the main Grenache is actually Grenache Noir because that is the red skin version. And I actually have a fun story. I met an Australian winemaker not too long ago, and she was telling me the story of how when they first planted a vineyard, a block of Semillon being one of the great white grapes of France. If you ever get a Sauterne, it makes a lot of like great dessert wines in the Sauterne and Barsac area. But it also makes amazing dry white wine. Hunter Valley in Australia makes Semillons that are like world famous at this point. So she planted a vineyard of Semillon, and 1 year, and Semillon, it's a white skin grape. That is what it's supposed to be. And 1 year, half the vineyard just turned into Semillon Gris, and it was gray skinned variety. And so she made an orange wine, the skin contact version of that wine, which turned it a nice little orangish amber hue because of those muddled pigments within the grape. And the next year, so one half of the vineyard turned to Gris and one half stayed proper Semillon Blanc, right? And the next year, the two sides of the vineyard switched. And the one side that was Blanc the year before became Gris, and the side that was Gris before became Blanc. And motherfuckers, that's grapevines for you. So I don't know. I have to dig further into how this works, how mutations work, and how common they are. I know they're very common, but like when you first plant a vineyard, is it more common? I think it's more common for the mutations to happen initially in early plantings, like while the vines are still like establishing themselves, the roots are still digging deep down into the ground, and kind of like they're laying the groundwork for what it's going to be going forward. Because I don't believe this happens that frequently to established vineyards, or not as frequently, although you will always have small chunks of that vineyard, like a block of it or a corner of it will suddenly breed differently or mutate differently or become something else, or suddenly crossbreed with another grape that, another vine somewhere else in the area, and suddenly you've got a little chunk of your vineyard that's growing a hybrid grape rather than what you originally planted. Like, vines are crazy in that regard. So this Pinot parent, which does no longer exist, we just know it shares a parent that we call Pinot because of DNA testing, right? So we can see the genetic similarities, and we're like, these all came from the same thing, whatever this thing was, and we're calling it Pinot, even though nobody knows. Like, we can't find any planted anymore. As far as we know, it's extinct. So this Pinot parent also created Pinot Meunier, which is one of the primary grapes in Champagne. You have Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot Meunier, which are the three main grapes that they make Champagne with. And folks, you can also find every once in a while a nice dry red, a proper red wine made with Pinot Meunier. They are amazing. I've yet to have a bad Pinot Meunier. It's not a well-known grape, so not many people do it, but if you can find one, buy it. Try it. They are great. Some sparkling wines, even some champagne houses, are now starting to make champagne with the majority of it being Pinot Meunier, which is a very new thing. That it was always the third wheel in champagne. Like Chardonnay and Pinot Noir were the two. If you ever get a Blanc de Blanc, that is a pure Chardonnay. A Blanc de Noir, that is pure Pinot Noir. And Pinot Meunier would just be peppered into some of the blends to, like, for the house style, give it a little extra body, a little extra structure. But now they're really experimenting with it. And I think climate change is actually making Pinot Meunier grow better than Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, the way Pinot Noir and Chardonnay used to grow in the past. But now they're struggling a little bit with those two. But Chardonnay also, Pinot Meunier, Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, and Chardonnay is yet another child grape of this parent Pinot. That is all, like, Champagne, that's just north of Burgundy or Bourgogne, and Burgundy and Bourgogne is where Pinot Noir and Chardonnay kind of live. So Champagne, Burgundy, that's plainly where this parent Pinot kind of originally stemmed from, because that's where all its child grapes seem to have come from as well. All right. Now, what about this week, Dallas?
All right. And now for this week's wine trivia question. We just learned in last week's episode about the Piquette style of wine, which is a second pressing of the grape skins, using them to make a second wine after they've already been soaked for the first. The Italians have their own version and name for this process of a second use of the grape skins, which they use in their world-famous style of winemaking from the Valpolicella region. What is the term the Italians use for this wine-making technique? Is it A, Recioto, B, Appassimento, C, Ripasso, or D, Metodo Segundo? Now again, we are looking for the Italian version of this process of a second pressing of the grape skins in order to create a second wine after they've been soaked for the first. Again, the Italian process is either A, Recioto, B, Appassimento, C, Ripasso, or D, Metodo Segundo. So just head on over to our Substack, vintertainmentstudios.com, to cast your vote in the poll, which will be embedded in the post of this Automatic Kafka episode. You can also message us or email us at vintertainmentstudios@gmail.com. All right, WSET Level 3 Professional Dave, as you like to be called these days, let's talk about today's work of entertainment. Let's talk about the comic Automatic Kafka by writer Joe Casey and artist Ashley Wood.
Absolutely. So, folks, Automatic Kafka was a 9-issue comic book series published by Wildstorm Comics under their Mature Readers imprint, which they called Eye of the Storm. And this series was published between September 2002 to July 2003. Wildstorm was, of course, founded by Jim Lee. It was his imprint at Image Comics. Image, of course, was a company founded when the top superstar artists of Marvel and DC left those quote-unquote big two companies to form their own publisher where they could have full creative control over their output.
That's right. Jim Lee's Wildstorm kicked off with his first creator-owned work, Wildcats, Wild Covert Action Teams. The imprint operated independently from 1992 to 1997 before the pressures of being a family man nudged Jim Lee to sell the company to DC Comics in 1998.
Back to DC, back to the big
That's
two.
right.
Yep.
Always. Everything always goes back, right? Originally, it was agreed that Wildstorm would continue to operate without editorial influence from DC proper, but in practice, this wasn't always the case, which is not an uncommon story. At the time of the acquisition, Wildstorm had established a creative services business providing art and graphic design to external clients. Because DC had no interest in the creative services business, Ted Adams, who had previously run the business at Wildstorm, and 3 other former Wildstorm employees founded Idea and Design Works, or IDW, as you probably know it, to serve the company's existing clients. IDW has since gone on to be their own powerhouse of a smaller publisher within the American comic scene. They also established a new imprint, America's Best Comics, or ABC, a label made specifically for writer Alan Moore of Watchmen and V for Vendetta fame, to create a series of adventure comics based on pulp heroes, mythology, and science fiction, essentially anything but superheroes. This was a sensitive arrangement, as Moore has sworn never to work with DC Comics again, so they had to ensure him that DC editorial would have no hand in ABC whatsoever. By 2005, this arrangement broke down completely, predominantly due to Alan Moore being called in to testify in a copyright infringement case regarding the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen feature film, of which Moore took no part in. But the complainants accused Moore's comic of being created as a smokescreen to cover up how DC and Warner Brothers took their script and slapped the LOEG name on it, which is precisely what Warner Brothers did, though the comic was in fact a work of Moore's own origin. He was so incensed by this, he took the entire label and moved it to Top Shelf Comics and swore, yet again, to never work with DC Comics, a promise he has kept till this day.
Amen. But during the same time, in 2002, Wildstorm created their own quote-unquote mature readers imprint they called Eye of the Storm, as already mentioned, which they hoped would counteract the shrinking sales of the entire comic book market that it was suffering in those days. You know, this was right around Marvel declared bankruptcy in 1996. They were coming out of that. Yeah. And this was right after the heyday of the 80s comics boom and the early 1990s, when Image Comics was originally founded. This was when, like, top-selling comics were selling millions of copies per issue, which by modern standards is insanity. Almost nothing sells that anymore. What they called we're going to get to Automatic Kafka here in a moment, but by the time Automatic Kafka, and one of the creators, Joe Casey on Automatic Kafka, he was working for Marvel before, and when his Marvel book sales started to lag, and they canceled his series at Marvel, they were selling numbers that are now today best-selling numbers, but they were so bad at the time that they canceled the comic because they're like, oh, this isn't doing very good, because they were doing so much better just before. But the whole comics market, it was all on this downward spiral. It was all on this downward trend. So it wasn't so much any individual creator or any individual book's fault that sales continued to decline. This was just a trend that was happening. Anyway, Wildstorm, Eye of the Storm, was kind of let's do something different. We were coming out of the heyday of the Vertigo comics world at this time. That was kind of the late 80s into the 90s, where you had like Sandman and John Constantine Hellblazer and Swamp Thing. You'd had Grant Morrison's Invisibles. You had Brian K. Vaughan's Why the Last Man was probably starting right around this time in the 00s. So like Vertigo Comics it had taken the comics world by storm. It had done really, really well. And Eye of the Storm, Wildstorm wanted a piece of that. So They produced the critically acclaimed and best-selling Sleeper by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. This was a style of comics. I don't think Sleeper is directly connected to their criminal series, but later they would create the criminal series, which is still going to this day. And it's very much in this style, like a crime noir with a little bit of something kind of pulpy or superheroic kind of, around the edges of the whole thing, but very crime noir at its core. You have Ex Machina by Brian K. Vaughan and Tony Harris. That was a comic that also critically, these were all like critically acclaimed and fan acclaimed at the time. Ex Machina, that is actually a great series, very Vertigo-like in the sense that it ended the way they wanted to. Like it was a mayor, and it was basically it was an ex-superhero who becomes a mayor of a city, and how he deals actually being a true blue politician and an ex-superhero with enemies and so on and so forth. And it's quite a well-regarded series. I read Ex Machina the very first story arc. I liked it quite a bit, but I never finished it all the way through. I think it ran like 60-something issues is what I want to say, but something like that.
Oh, you definitely got further than me. I think I got through like 10.
Okay. Oh, maybe? No. I mean, I only got through like 10 or 12. Yeah. The first story arc. So no, I'm saying the series as a whole.
Okay,
like
gotcha.
60 issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So Ex Machina. Then they also did The Boys by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson, the same one comic that has now become the Amazon Prime TV show that has become a huge hit and has even the TV show is spun off. And just to show you, so even The Boys, though, that was a comic that soon moved to Dynamite Comics because DC, as much as they said they weren't going to interfere editorially, DC was uncomfortable with the anti-superhero content of the Boys book. Weren't these guys fucking geniuses? They let that book go. That's the book they let go. And we're like, yeah, we don't want to be associated with that book. And look at the money they've left on the table there. And then there was also Wildcats 3.0 by Joe Casey, the writer of the book we're going to talk about today, and Dustin Nguyen, and finally, yes, also by Joe Casey and up-and-coming Aussie artist Ashley Wood, Automatic Kafka. Now, writer Joe Casey, as I already mentioned, he had written for Marvel before then, penning numerous X-Men books. He did Cable. He did some of the X-Men miniseries. He also did more obscure Marvel titles like Deathlock. And also had begun penning one of the Superman books right around this time in 2001. He started penning Adventures of Superman. And then his adult spin on Wildcats with the 3.0 book had gotten both critical and fan acclaim. And so Wildstorm was actually eager for Casey to bring them something else, something original. So Casey had been sitting on a pitch called Strangers. That is Strangers with the American dollar sign for the two S's on either side of that word, right? And it was a very capitalist take on a superhero team for the then modern world. So Casey had started up and Casey has, by the way, he has started up a Substack where you can read.
It's good. It's actually good. It's good. It's really good.
Yeah. You can read a 3-part history of the making of this series, Automatic Kafka. All 3 links will be provided down below in the description of this episode. We recommend you go give that a read and subscribe to Joe while you're at it and learn a little bit about this. But we won't go too deep into this because you can read his, in his own words, what he did. Yeah. But in brief, this pitch was something Casey had never shown anyone, but merely wrote it, in his own words now, essentially for himself, in kind of a voice for himself, because he never tailored it for a publisher at that point in time, right? He had never bothered to show it to an artist, nobody. So he brushed it off. When Wildstorm was looking for something else, he was like, let me look at the Strangers pitch again. So he brushed it off, started tooling around with it, and soon updated the concept to focus on one predominantly of its members, Automatic Kafka.
And in Casey's own words, quote, "This colorful cast of characters includes the handsome billionaire financier called The Warning. This guy makes Bruce Wayne and Tony Stark look like bums. The alluring sex witch, Helen of Troy. Quite a sight to behold in her flying convertible." Yes, flying convertible. "The quick-witted sharpshooter Saint Nick, and the whiskey-drinking parody of a patriarch hero named the Constitution. And a steady succession of teenage sidekicks, all named, appropriately enough, the Declaration. At this point, we won't even get into the infant A-bomb known as Spastic Ben, an artificially engineered infant that could detonate on command. But suffice it to say, there are some fantastic characters who are kind of odd, quirky, and fantastic, and counter to just about anything you've ever seen. The series picks up long after The Stranger disbanded. The Strangers disbanded, but they're still celebrities. Automatic Kafka is asked to join the National Park Service, or NPS, an established organization of the government in the Wildstorm universe. And Kafka's ex-boss, the Warning, suggests that Kafka can avoid being drafted by hiding in plain sight as a pop culture icon, starting with becoming a major TV game show host. The series ran 9 issues between 2002 and 2003 and did get a rightly experimental final issue to wrap things up. Sadly, the series has never been collected in trade, paperback, graphic novel format, at least not at the time of this recording. Now, why don't we talk about some wines? How about that? That's generally why we hear at least half the reason,
Half the reason. So what are we pairing? What are we pairing with this particular book and why? We'll talk, of course, we'll have more of a conversation on the book itself after we talk about the wines, but let's talk about the whole feeling of this book, the whole sense of this book, and what it is we're trying to match or contrast.
It's funny. When I first started the book, and I think I mentioned this, it did I wasn't unexpected in terms of this sort of disbanded troupe of quote unquote superheroes, we'll call them, who are now trying to figure out what life looks like after, their utility. And curiously enough, for me, I'll be honest, it didn't sing to me for the first few issues. Didn't really sing for me. I thought there's some great character works. The art is my kind of shit. It just, and I've got some great quotes from Ashley later on we may get into, but the art style is fantastic. So,
I mean, Casey sought him out for this book specifically. Like
you see why.
Ashley had done some like anthology work, like some very like Aussie specific comics at the time, but like he hadn't broken out yet when Joe went out to get him for Automatic Kafka. Although Ashley Wood, he did not break out because of Automatic Kafka either, unfortunately. This book
he mentions it often too.
Yes, both Casey and Ashley have basically been like, yeah, this book did not find its audience, unfortunately. So it's why it only ran 9 issues and still hasn't been collected in trade paperback format. But Ashley Wood is like one of the bigs today. Like I think he mostly makes a living doing cover art at this point because he just gets paid so handsomely for a cover because his art is so amazing. But occasionally we'll still do, I think, a full book. But I have not kept up as well as I should. But anyway, Dallas, keep going.
So anyway, the series it's fairly straightforward to me. At least the first act. I love the character. We've gotten the synopsis, so I won't go through that. But initially, it felt like it was crying out to be paired with something a bit crisper, maybe white. That was kind of where I was leaning initially. But as I got further and deeper into it, it was kind of clear that Kafka's life before the offer is one thing, and his life after the offer becomes something else. And so there's a little tension between those moments in his life. And I wanted something clearly that was a blend that had a little tension to it. And of course I decided to go with the red. I definitely wanted something that was kind of going to blossom over time. You open it up and you let it sit. The first glass tastes different than the third. So I went with what I think is a perfect pairing. I will say that. I never say that, but I think this is a perfect pairing for those who are listening and
Okay.
paying attention. I'm sure no one is, but if you are, hey. Anyway,
Yeah, no one is.
no, of course no one is. I went with a vintage red out of South Africa. It is a blend of Shiraz, Cinsault, and Grenache. You get that dark, pulpy thing from the Syrah, that core. You get a lift from the Grenache. Curiously enough, this piece is so irreverent in some of the character play
Mm-hmm.
that it does elicit that quirky kind of, this is just, it's hilarious, it's fun, it's light. And so that Cinsault kind of perfumes things up, and it's done in the Rhone style, as it says.
Yep.
It is the
Yep.
origin of Swartland, which I still need to figure out what Swartland. I think it is the region in South Africa known for the wine. I will get back to you guys on that. Known for this particular.
There's a couple, but I mean there are some that are like the biggest or like the OGs.
Right.
in
But
South
I
Africa.
specifically
Yeah.
Swartland. It was something interesting about it that
I think
don't
it is. I
remember
think it's
at
one
this
of the
time.
bigs. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I went with the Secateurs Vintage Red 2021 from South Africa and the Badenhorst family. There's a lot going on politically in South Africa right now, and I know nothing at this point about the Badenhorst family. Hopefully, they're just great and don't have any dark histories associated with them.
Right. Hopefully we can say their name and not get canceled. We have no idea.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what I paired with this guy. It's a Secateurs 2021 vintage red, price point under $20. And I actually got this, as you guys know, from one of our favorites, K&L Wine. You can order from those guys. They have a location here in Los Angeles as well as in I forget the other location.
Redwood City, San
Redwood
Francisco.
City. That's what it is. Redwood City, San Francisco. So please check it out and let us know if you hate it, if you love it. What you got, Dave?
Yeah, and I will also say the Rhone style, that is also called, so Grenache, Syrah, Cinsault is like the fourth biggest grape in that,
Yeah.
and then of course Mourvedre is usually, and you usually see this elsewhere when it's outside of the Rhone, it's called a GSM blend.
Yes.
For Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre. In this case, and Cinsault has always been almost as big as Mourvedre, but poor dear,
Yeah.
it never gets the claim.
It really
it's
doesn't.
always GSM, not GSMC.
No.
And it's like GSM, and I think because a lot of California wines try this, they really do stick to those three. They rarely put the Cinsault in there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, but you will find it often. So it's a quote unquote GSM blend with that C thrown in without the M. But if you see a GSM blend, that is the Rhone style. And it always is those four grapes predominantly. There are yet another litany of smaller grapes that they can use as well in the Rhone. Petite Syrah is one, I believe, as well as Syrah. I believe Carignan is yet another one as well. There's a whole bunch of others, but GSM, C are the big four. You will always find that. So anyways, South African version of that Rhone / GSM style. All right, so for me, this is a comic that is, of course, especially for the time, I think parts of this comic have not aged well, and not in the way that it's in a way of like being horribly offensive or anything like that, but it feels a little of its time, quote unquote, because it's taking superheroes and it's riffing on them in a way that is much more mature than most superhero comics had ever done at that time. It is very much coming in the shadow of Vertigo comics, and you can feel, and that Casey himself, I believe, has even said, like, look, he was blown away by like Alan Moore's work on Swamp Thing. He was blown away by Grant Morrison, what he did in Animal Man. He was blown away by these types of new takes on superheroes that were really experimenting with the form, what it could do. I think in 2025, a lot of these things feel a little like it's dabbling. Automatic Kafka feels a little bit like someone doing a Vertigo comic.
Yeah.
Quote, you know what I mean? Like a little too on the nose. Like I'm trying too hard to make my Vertigo comic. Yeah. And it wasn't natural yet to Casey as much, although a couple of the issues are, and we're going to get to those as we go. A couple of the issues really sing.
Issue 4,
issue 4, and honestly the last issue for me as well. It's a little, it doesn't sing as much as issue 4. It's not as subtle as issue 4, But and we're going to talk about all that in a minute. But this is very much, regardless of the fact that not everything ages as well as other parts of the comic. Overall, this is unquestionably taking something that is affiliated with kids and children and more juvenile, forms of narrative like superheroes, and adultifying them, really aging them up and bringing them into the real world and being like, okay, let's explore it. Like, if superheroes were in the real world, yes, they'd be fucking celebrities. Of course they would be.
And they'd be horrible people.
And they'd be horrible people. And if you're a celebrity, you'd be about them. Eventually, you'd be about the money. You'd be about the lifestyle. You'd be about your own fame and your own name. And you would not be able to relate to normal people anymore. Like, that is what being a superhero would be. And this series does do a pretty magnificent job of that in certain ways. So I wanted a wine that was also associated with being juvenile, with being an immature palate that then was taken somewhere where it's like, this is the much more adult, refined, mature palate version of a wine that we normally don't think of in those terms. Now, on a broad, before I get to my specific wine, which will be hard to get and will be hard to find because it is like a one wine from one place and there's no one else that does it, on broader strokes. If you want to go out there, folks, and just find yourself a Riesling or a Gewürztraminer, these are two wines that I bet, if you are not that much of a wine drinker, if you yourself still have what you might consider to be a less refined or a less mature palate than the true wine aficionados out there, you are probably thinking to yourself right now, oh, Riesling and Gewürztraminer, they're sweet. I don't like that. And that's because you're drinking the shit stuff. And you're drinking, and I'd say shit stuff, but because there are some off-dry or semi-sweet Rieslings and Gewürztraminers that are actually impeccably well made.
Absolutely.
You're probably not spending the money on the good stuff, though. You're buying the under $20 versions of Riesling and Gewürztraminer that are semi-sweet or at the very least off-dry. Now, as we learned in a previous trivia question, dry just means no sugar. So it means completely unsweet, literally, in terms of literal sugar being left in the wine. Off dry, you're leaving just a teeny bit of sugar in there, and then you get to like medium dry and medium sweet or semi-sweet, and that's when you're leaving more and more and more sugar in there. So it's getting sweeter and sweeter. Riesling and Gewürztraminer often can come in off dry and semi-sweet forms. And a lot of the times, especially these days, especially if you're spending less than $20 a bottle, it's because the juice itself ain't that good. So they're making it sweet to make it better and make it more drinkable. And therefore, you're drinking it, and like it's nice for a couple of sips, and then you quickly get sick.
It's great when you're already drunk.
Yes. Great. Or again, the first couple sips, there is something. It's dialed in to where you're like, oh yeah, this is not bad.
Initially pleasing. Yeah.
Yes, but then a couple of sips later, you're like, oh, that's all I need. I don't need to finish this glass, let alone this bottle. Exactly. This is too much. So, that is like your childlike wine version of Gewürztraminer Riesling. But both of these wines, Riesling is considered like the true wine nerds out there. Riesling is the white wine that they love. And the reason for that is the truly great Riesling out there, for the most part, it's usually dry. And especially if it's coming from Germany, you look for the word trocken, Trocken. That means dry. That means no sugar, not sweet at all. And that Riesling, that is your automatic Kafka Riesling compared to the semi-sweet.
By the way, my device to remember what truckin' means, it's fucking truckin' is dry. Just take that as you wish.
There you go. Fucking truckin'. Fucking truckin'. Just remember, it's with an O, not a U.
Yes,
it's not
fucking truckin'. Although if you spell it truckin', I'm pretty sure a wine aficionado will know exactly what you mean.
You probably get close. Yeah, you probably get close. Fucking truckin', baby.
That's right.
So truckin', if you get a Riesling that is not made in Germany, if you get a Australian Riesling, you get a Michigan Riesling, or a California Riesling. Riesling is a Canadian Riesling. It's grown in a lot of different places. But if you get it outside, you just got to look for the word dry. Somewhere on that label, it will specify that, because Riesling is really good in all its many facets of dryness, from completely dry all the way to a dessert wine. And by the way, there is a Trockenbeeren aus Riesling, okay? And that is, it's all one word, so you hopefully won't get confused. You're either going to see Trocken or you're going to see a much longer word where trocken is the first part of that word, but it's Trockenbiernosrisse. And that is a super sweet dessert wine. So don't get confused there. It's because they dry the grapes out to concentrate the sugars and then make a really super sweet wine with it, which is why the trocken word is in there, because it means dry. But only trocken on its own. That's what you're looking for that. Now, Gewürztraminer, a little trickier because there is no terminology on the bottle. If you find a Gewürztraminer, you just got to look it up online on your phone. If you're in a shop, ask the person who works there, is this a dry version of Gewürztraminer? Because they don't fucking tell you, and that sucks. And it's a kind of a problem because most Gewürztraminer is a very floral, and it has a certain like lychee type sweetness on the palate to its flavor profile. But if you get a truly dry Gewürztraminer, it is also the automatic Kafka version of that grape. It's very nice. It's very refined. It's very pleasing. And yet it can challenge you more if you're used to the semi-sweet stuff. But get away from the semi-sweet stuff. Now, for me, I still decided to go for a red wine as my specific pairing in this. And so I decided to go with a grape called Dornfelder. All right. And Dornfelder, it is a big red grape in Germany, but it's a grape that thrives in the cold climate of Germany. They get high yields. They can grow it just about anywhere. It has no problem getting ripe and developing high sugar levels. A lot of the times in Germany, that's the hardest struggle with a lot of their wines, is like they tend to be very austere wines, like wines coming out of Canada, like wines coming out of the Finger Lakes or Michigan, all those cold climate areas. They struggle to get enough sugar in the grapes initially. So there's actually a practice allowed in Germany called chapitalization. And chapitalization is when after you pick the grapes and you crush it and you have the juice, you are then allowed to add sugar to the juice before fermentation so that you can get high enough alcohol levels in the final product. So you're not adding sugar to sweeten the final wine. You're adding sugar just to have enough alcohol to make the whole thing balance. Otherwise, you literally can't even get high enough alcohol levels to make it taste like a decent wine because they can struggle ripening the grapes enough in a lot of places in Germany. Dornfelder ain't got this issue. It gets sugar, even in that cold climate. It can grow high yields. Now, the problem with that is because of the high yields, that's what people do in Germany. They let it grow out of control. And when you get high yields, if you have too many grapes on a vine, they're all sharing the same water and sugar, and like the flavor is not concentrated in any given grape. It's all spread thin amongst all of them. So you get a weaker final wine. You get a weaker flavor profile. You get sugar, but it's just sort of like you get these bloated grapes with too much sugar. So what they tend to do is they tend to make semi-sweet wines with it that are light in color. And it's funny because Dornfelder is a dark colored grape, thick-skinned. It can make a black wine, like something that is so inky dark, it is virtually opaque. Yet what they mostly make in Germany with it are these sort of like fun, semi-sweet, light in color, not enough skin extraction in there, easy drinking, sweet wines. Often you'll find Dornfelder coming over from Germany in the States during Christmas time is like these sweet, easy drinking holiday things. It's like Manischewitz. It's just that easy. You could give this to, and this is the point, you could give it to a child and they would actually not have a hard time drinking this. Just like Manischewitz. It's like the only thing that has a little bit of alcohol in it they can kind of take, and the alcohol doesn't turn them off. And the sugar and the sweetness and the easy flavors are just like easy. So that version is the superhero version for kids. Now I have with me here a Dornfelder from California. From Paley Wine. You can tell by this label is black, right? And that's to show how dark the grape actually is. And this wine on the inside, when I pull this cork out of this bottle, the bottom of that cork is like, it is so dark, it just sucks up the light. Like nothing reflects off of it. It's insanity. I've never seen a wine this dark before in my life. And this is a perfectly dry, unsweet, fine Dornfelder wine, which you rarely see in the world. It's from Paley Wine Company, which is out of Santa Barbara County here in California. If you can find this, I don't know if anyone else makes a Dornfelder like this. I've never found one. I've never seen one. I've never actually seen anyone else in California do Dornfelder, period. But this one, this is your automatic Kafka version of Dornfelder. This is it's trying very hard to be an adult wine version of Dornfelder. It succeeds. It's very tasty. It's dense. It's deep. It's chewy. It's got a decent acidity, which Dornfelder actually has. All this color, all this depth, fruit, herbs, tobacco, earth. It's all there. It's wonderful. So this is my pairing with Automatic Kafka. It reminds me so much of what Automatic Kafka is doing with superheroes that's my pairing.
Nice. I like that. I'm going to have a perfectly dry Dornfelder. All right.
I know. And believe me, it's virtually black in color. It's bizarre.
Huh.
Like, I've never seen a wine so dark that I'm like, I'm having a hard time calling it purple or anything else but black. It's just... nothing gets through it. It is where light goes to die. It's incredible to look at. So, and on that note, Automatic Kafka, where light goes to die.
There you go.
So, conversation about Automatic Kafka from there. Dallas, thoughts on this comic in general? Now, you mentioned in your notes on your wine when you were talking about this series that you wrote down that this series, Automatic Kafka, is quote unquote pretty straightforward and quote unquote standard superhero counterculture fare.
Yeah.
Which almost feels like a what's the word I'm looking for? A contradiction in terms, right? Standard and
totally
counterculture.
It totally is.
So,
but that's what's interesting about this comic is, I think, in line with what you were saying, it feels a little. When I compare it to where we are now, in terms of all the media that's come out, this was released, 20 years ago now? Was it 20 years? Is it released 20 years at
23 years ago now, yeah.
23 years. It did sort of ring very similar to, the Watchmen sort of dynamic. You got the character who's sort of, he's not necessarily retired, but he's definitely reached the end of his first and primary utility. He's a bit of an analog, and he's now searching for relevance in a new way. And for him, that relevance is essentially some sort of proximity to humanness, right? He's searching for some sort of human existence. And I think mostly because the first act felt very much, with the exception of issue 4, which we will definitely get to, which, by the way, I almost don't want to tell people what's happening in issue 4, because the surprise of realizing it after the fact, after I read issue 4, and I was like, oh, wait, hold on.
We'll give a spoiler. We'll give a spoiler alert. Yeah.
Yes, that's true. Okay, good point. Anyway, so yeah, it felt pretty straightforward in that sense. But the counterculture thing is the sort of political exploits after he gets the offer. His idea of going into the, which essentially is influencer realm. It's sort of an influencer. Every time I started to think about this pop culture sort of icon that he was sort of becoming or offered to become, it was very influencery, and
influencer before there were influencers,
right, and that's why I started to wonder if this came out today, would it actually resonate more than it did then? And on a surface level, of course, right.
Yeah.
On that sort of surface level, it's like, well, yeah, this is sort of a direct commentary on exactly where we are right now. Where you offer this person who had a certain utility, fame, and social media sort of stardom as a platform. And I don't know. I would it have been a little too on the nose if it came out now? Would it have been a little too direct of a commentary? I
think
don't know. I honestly don't know. I think it would definitely have found an audience, a much bigger,
yes.
broader audience today, for sure, just with the
Hmm.
state of things. But understanding when it came out, it seems like it was so, I don't want to say subversive, but as you said, it felt as if it was trying to do directly what those other comics had been doing, the Vertigo and those guys. It was sort of a
Right.
direct, my
Right.
version. This is me doing my Vertigo. That's kind of what it
Right.
felt
Right.
like in the
And
first
I
half.
think that's the thing is this comic feels like kind of a 50-50. Like one half, it's ahead of its time. And on the
Right.
other half, it was playing catch up to what had come the decade before. And
Yeah,
so like it was jumping into that
that's true.
pool.
Yeah.
And so part of it feels like, oh, right, this is this guy jumping into that pool and taking his
Yeah.
swing or stepping up to the plate. Let's not mix
Right.
metaphors. Stepping
My
up to
turn
the
at bat.
plate and
Oh,
taking
we mix metaphors
Exactly.
here, buddy, all the time.
all the time. But
We
stepping
break
up
all
to the
the
plate,
rules.
taking his it's his turn to bat, and then on the other hand, though, a lot of what he was doing and exploring, it's almost like social media helped better define what it is he was trying to say in terms
I
of
like that.
I think being a game show host wasn't a bad idea, but it almost
Right.
wasn't as specific. You're like, okay, that kind of
Right.
works,
Right.
but where we went with culture afterwards, where the influencers and the greatest influencers and who people started to follow and listen to, it's one of the big
Right.
crises we're having in politics right now is like, how do you get a message to someone? Who are they actually following? And it's not traditional media the way it used to be. So, and that is where this comic both feels dated, but was also ahead of its time, as it was searching for a way to say something that it was much more resonant today, but it didn't, culture itself hadn't put forward those
That didn't
figureheads for
exist.
him to
Right,
easily
right,
riff
right.
on. Yes. Right.
And I think that's one of the reasons I think this comic this piece will definitely sort of be added to our sort of canon of importance, because it did kind of foreshadow where we were going. It didn't have necessarily, they didn't necessarily have the language or the iconography to draw on, and so using the game show host as a stand-in for that, like you said, definitely potent in its time, but had, you know, they had the ability to kind of formulate that idea of the internet influencer. This comic would still be talked about today. I think it just I find it, you know, it's very potent. I think it's going to be
I think people would respond well to, like, DC. Whoever owns Wildstorm, I'm pretty sure it's still DC. DC,
Yeah, probably.
put the graphic novel out, for fuck's sake. Like, put
Please,
it out
God.
on digital. Do something. Like, come on, man.
Yeah, that's actually.
Let's see what people say. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think so. Speaking of which, let me you vamp for a minute while I find this quote from Ashley. Hold on, I've got it saved somewhere. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh, there it
yeah.
is. All right,
You find that. So
here we go.
Oh.
I found it. So, by the way, Ashley Wood, guys, is the artist. We've talked about him quite a bit here, and you're probably very familiar with some of his work because, as Dave said, he is not only a name, he is in high demand and just kind of fantastic. On his blog from 2010. It's kind of sad. This may be a little long. He said, "I received a copy of the Norma Editorial Automatic Kafka hardcover today. So I enjoyed making this comic with Joe Casey. That is a massive understatement. This is my Watchman." That's his acclaim, right? This is my Watchman. Joe and me really put our hearts and souls into this, and it's actually a very layered story, which was canceled well before its conclusion. Of course, it was panned from the get-go. Reviewers followed each other's lead and wrote it off as dribble, which is traditionally a good sign in my books. But Joe and me carried on. Right. We knew it was special and still do. I think it has more fans now than it did then. This book pretty much ended my career at DC and Wildstorm. Not such a bad thing, but my dreams of Batman were taken out back and shot 3 times in the head. I don't speak much to Joe these days. In fact, hardly anyone from that period. But regardless, this book made me and Joe brothers in a war to bring something different to the U.S. superhero comics. A big tip of the hat to a great writer, Joe Casey. it's just it's
Nice,
just
nice.
you can hear the sort of, it's not bitterness. I don't think it's bitterness. It's just sort of a maybe a sadness that your baby wasn't received as well
Yeah,
as it should have been, you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So Joe Casey, if you're out there, we love it.
we do love it, and Joe Casey and Ashley, you're both out there, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And I think it's not quite right to call it bitterness or regret. It is
Right.
something that it straddles these lines, because you don't regret doing it. You regret that you couldn't go farther with it, that it didn't find its audience at the time. You would love to have just been able to, ride the wave of weird comics of that day, and been able to, even if it was like, it wasn't selling, it was never a bestseller, but they let us do it for 2 years, 3 years, however
Right.
long. And instead you didn't even get a year, right? It's like issue 9 and they're like, and we're done with this experiment.
I
And it's
know,
like,
man.
okay. Now that said, folks, it did not get the ending that it wanted, but we're going to talk a little bit about the final issue, because it did get a wrap up that was very suitable to this comic, I think, in many ways. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but first, Dallas, this is a comic about a superhero team, so we met a lot of, there's Automatic Kafka, but there's a lot of other characters. Favorite character for you? Is there a favorite character? Is it Automatic Kafka himself? Is it someone else?
I think Automatic Kafka that's probably the character I identify most with. It's like, oh, look at me, I'm trying to be human. Yay. But I think the most interesting, most fun character for me was the Constitution. I think that guy,
Of course.
He needs his own issue right now. He needs his own. Right now is the perfect time. Joe, Ashley, if you guys got a little free time, I'm going to go ahead and say the Constitution deserves his own little highlight. So yeah, for me, the Constitution. What about you?
I think, the Constitution, first off, let me just agree with you there and say that, Automatic Kafka becomes a game show host. The Constitution of America becomes a porn star. That is his dream. And to break records. And we only just recently, I think early this year or late last year, a porn star broke the record yet again of like the most partners in a single video kind of a thing. Right. And apparently that is a thing that happens every once in a while, like once a decade in the porn world, is like someone gets it in their head that they're like, I'm setting the new record and we're gonna go with this. And it is a
future episode, guys. Future episode.
Future episode. In their own words, I believe this latest lady, she defined it. She's like, look, this is our Olympics, right? This is our like competing. It is a physical feat of endurance is like what you're doing. Like that is, and that's why you take the same pride in that as an Olympic athlete breaking that type of a record. And it was interesting because I really did, when I saw that quote, when I saw that write-up about the event and how she described it, I was like, yeah, okay, I buy that 100%. I mean, think about how hard it is for any of us, especially, me and Dallas we ain't spring chickens. So
speak for your fucking self.
Think about how hard it is to have just a normal sexual encounter, let alone breaking world records. That is a feat of true Olympic endurance. It's like, that ain't, as much as we think of sex as like that thing that we have to keep under control because it's the thing we could do. We have to be, yes, you should be respectable about it and respect boundaries and not for, blah, blah, blah. But think about how hard that would actually be. It's not easy to do. So I completely bought that. So yes, his story, it was great that he had that where Automatic Kafka became a game show host. I thought that was brilliant. My favorite character, I think is probably the Warning. I think I have to give my favorite character to him just because he was the ultimate pragmatist in everything. Like nothing, it's not that nothing bothered him, it's not that nothing threw him. Like he always had to respond to things that like he didn't have, the world was not, he kind of comes across like a puppet master, but that isn't really what he does. He more like the moment he learns new information, he's like, okay, well, I'll go do it differently now to take that in. And everything is just get it done to get the result that I want of whatever's happening in the world. And because he's that pragmatic, never disappearing into sex or drugs or fame or any of this stuff. He's not distracted by anything. And so he comes across as like this, yes, we mentioned it makes, this character makes Tony Stark and Bruce Wayne look like bums because this man, he's wealthy. He's like that Elon Musky kind of character, except never distracted by the bullshit, never going into the culture wars, never going into the, he's just like, all I'm here to do is what I want to do. And I'm going to do what needs to be done to make that happen. And I'm going to keep everyone happy or manipulate them or piss them off if that serves me. Like everything is just to get the result. And it's amazing to watch a character written where all that matters is the end result. And it's funny because everyone else is so baffled by him in so many ways because there's zero bullshit to anything. Yeah. And that is weird because it's very inhuman, right? To have no bullshit about anything. Even the robot, Automatic Kafka, has so much bullshit. Like is so weirdly human in his ways and gets lost in his own, like, do I feel, because I'm a robot, am I not? There's a drug in this comic. I forget, nanotech heroin or something like that.
Nanotech carry-on, yeah.
So yeah, he's as lost as any of the other human characters, but not the Warning. All right, go over to you, Dallas.
Just some sort of final thoughts or nearing final thoughts. Episode 4, I keep saying episode, issue 4. Let's give a brief dive into that real quick.
Issue 4, yes.
I keep saying, I love saying episode. But upon the first reading, there was some moments when I was like, this rings so familiar. This dynamic. What's happening here? What's happening here? What's happening here? What's happening here? I was getting these sort of phantom visuals of something that was very familiar. And once you go back and realize how impactful, I'll just say this name, Charles Schultz's work was on Joe Casey, you will begin to see the influence and the direct influence, honestly, of on issue 4.
I will say one of the links I'm going to have down below in the description of this episode, I said Joe Casey's on Substack. We're going to have 3 links to his write-ups. 2 of them are the history of Automatic Kafka, and 1 post is just breaking down this issue number 4. So read it if you want to know in advance. If not, seek this out. I believe you can purchase these issues digitally, like on Kindle and whatnot. So they're available, but not, or you can track down old issues physically, but there's no trade paperback. There's no graphic novel collection. So you're on your own to seek out this 9-issue series. I don't think it's expensive if you want to dig it up. I think you're going to find these issues probably for a deal because this is a bit of a forgotten series, especially in light of not having a trade paperback collection. A little crazy, but it's crazy. You decide whether you want to read issue number 4 before reading Joe Casey's write-up about issue number 4. I will say, spoiler alert, here we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. We're going to talk about it in 3, 2, 1. So I noticed one of the characters was named Charles Brown right away in the issue 3, right? When we first meet him. And I was like, oh, that's cute. And then when we started following him in issue number 4, I actually kind of forgot my, oh, that's cute thought that I had. And we got pretty far into the issue before I was like, oh, right. This is the Charles Brown guy. Duh. And it was the moment the 2 women were standing there and the one with the glasses calls the other one sir. That's when it all clicked. That's when I was like, oh,
was good.
Right.
That was good.
Right.
That was good.
And
so good.
This series, part of what this issue in specific is exploring and what the series explores to some degree is whether it's a good thing that that characters survive beyond their original creator. Yeah. And because they can be bastardized and used in ways the creator never would have intended or never would have wanted to see. And Joe Casey was very upfront. He's like, yeah, that's me doing this in issue number 4. I am doing this in a way that probably Charles Schultz would hate and roll over in his grave. I'm not sure. I don't know how much I agree with that. I think Charles Schultz seemed like a fairly forward-thinking, open-minded individual. But I don't know about that. I'm not 100%.
I will
But
say
that
this. I
said,
think he would have had the biggest issue with the Lucy's 5-cent psychiatry roadside sort of
Probably.
stand. It's like
Yes.
with Charlie Brown.
Yes,
That's
yes.
fucking crazy. I love it. Go ahead. Sorry.
But this goes into the final issue of Automatic Kafka, where it's an experimental issue. Also, spoilers continue, guys. So only listen to this if you want to. Otherwise, go read the series first, come back and listen to this. But it's a very meta final issue. They were unceremoniously canceled. So Joe Casey and Ashley Wood themselves show up and just like walk Automatic Kafka through a cancellation of a series and what it means and why the story is never going to go anywhere else or be finished in any other way, and what it means to the audience, what it means to him, what it means to them, why these things happen. And then they go back to the Charles Brown. Charles Brown shows up again one more time, and they talk a little bit more about like, look, maybe this is for the best. We don't want you to survive beyond us. Like, if we can't finish, like, we're finishing you off this way, so there's really there's nothing else to be done with you. There's nothing else to be done with the strangers. There's nothing else to be done with any of these characters. Maybe it's best everyone forgets about you so no one tries to revive you, 20, 30 years later and do something we would never want to see. So that's a big theme of this series as well, is that when it's done, maybe if we don't get to do it, maybe it's for the best that no one does it and we just let you go. That's how the series essentially ends.
Yeah, that was that was one of those unexpected notes. I would say that ending is probably the most unexpected ending I've ever read in just about anything, because it was so, like I said, meta, but it was also so terrestrial in an odd way. And it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Yeah.
The only other ending I can think of that's fairly one, it's a little bit of a riff on Grant Morrison's final issue of Animal Man. I will say that. It's very different. It's its own thing. It talks about different things, but it's very much plainly inspired by, I think, because that was the first time I think comics had ever done that, and that predates this one. But also, the only other thing, there is a martial arts movie out there called Thunderbolt. I want to say Thunderbolt. Let me double check on that, actually. But it is a 1980s Shaw Brothers film, very late era Shaw Brothers, and it also ends in this very, very sudden. It's a short, like 80-minute martial arts movie. It's amazing. Everyone should go look this up. I'm going to see if I can make sure. Thunderclap. There we go. I knew Thunderbolt wasn't right. So it's called Thunderclap from 1984. See if you can track that down. It's an amazing Shaw Brothers martial arts movie. The action is insane. It is very way out there. It's kind of fantastical. It's kind of like gods and demons on Earth and all fighting. It's wonderful. And it ends in just a jaw-droppingly meta way that you do not see coming whatsoever. But Automatic Kafka reminded me a fair bit of that, so I will mention that one as well. And the one thing I will also say is that I'm not sure I agree. I like the fact, or I think it's a good thing, we have public domain for the concept of, I do agree that corporate ownership forever and ever and ever is not the best thing in the world. I like that it goes to the public domain, and yes, people are going to do stupid, silly shit with these characters when they go into the public domain, especially because right now, public domain got extended for so fucking long, thanks to Disney, that by the time it finally hit public domain, now I feel like all the horror movies of like, great, Popeye's in the public domain, great, Mickey Mouse is in the public domain, great, Winnie the Pooh is in the public domain. They have to make all these cheap, shitty horror movies. I think it's just the middle finger to why we had to wait so long in the first place. And that's what we're kind of experiencing there. It ain't great, but I understand why it's happening. And so I think I like it coming to public domain. I think that is a public service, and like, let people explore with your characters from that point on. It belongs to everyone else, like even Peanuts, even Charles Schultz, even that. It's like, let it go. Let it be. Let it belong to the rest of us. And is everything going to be worthwhile? No, God, no. It's like fan fiction. It's like, it doesn't harm anything. It doesn't, and it does feed into the larger connection that people have with their things. Some of those connections are going to be healthy, some of them will not. But especially thinking of fan fiction. But regardless, I do think it is the natural evolution of things and how they embed themselves within culture. And at some point, it's not yours anymore. It is, it's like when they say you release art to the world and it's no longer yours as soon as you do that.
On one hand, yes, I think, especially when you're speaking about products or projects or ideas or characters like Schultz's, which just have been in the sort of public sphere for decades and decades. And also coming from the sort of strip world where it's weekly, sort of there's this backlog of stuff. Yeah, I absolutely agree that the idea of it taking on a life of its own, in the long run makes perfect sense. But when I look at the case for Casey and Wood with this particular project, 9 issues, you can tell that they probably had a massive world at least sort of formulated in their mind, that they really truly wanted to sort of
they wanted to do years of this. Yeah.
And so I get that kind of default to where they just sort of close the door as quickly and permanently as possible, so that if it is touched again, it is via the hands of the original creator. And I myself am like that too. It's like, no, absolutely not. You're not touching my fucking shit.
I agree in this case. In this specific case, I 100% agree. I'm like, this was not, there was not enough time for this to embed itself into a culture. So I'm like, absolutely close that door and move on, and give the parent company as little reason as possible to ever want to revisit it again. 100%. I'm with anyone on that. I just think I think my caveat is public domain. I think once you release it, if the world still cares or wants to care, that is a good thing. I feel like that is a positive thing. If the corporate ownership, that it's kind of its own beast, especially with how long they own it now, is a problem. Yeah.
Beautiful.
All right.
Automatic Kafka, guys.
That is our talk on Automatic Kafka. Yeah, go check that out. Go try and find those individual issues one way or the other, digital or physical. And DC Wildstorm, put out that trade paperback. I know we hate that you still own this thing. We just besmirched your corporate ownership, but do something useful with it and put out the graphic novel. All right, and go find everyone Joe Casey. You can find him on his Substack. We will have links down below, but also just to say it once, thejoecasey.substack.com. That is Joe, Joe, Casey, Casey, thejoecasey.substack.com. We will have links to those 3 articles down below. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. As always, please follow us on our Substack, vintertainmentstudios.com. That'll take us to the Substack, where you will find all sorts of bonus articles on wine and entertainment, bonus pairings, interactive polls. You will find the trivia question of the week in the episode on the post on Automatic Kafka here, where you can vote on it and see if you can get the answer correct. You can also, some of the things that we have on that Substack will only be available to paid subscribers, and you can support us there. That is only $2 a month to have access to everything. We know that it's hard to support all the creators you want to support these days. So if we are one of them, $2 a month gets you everything, or $19.60 a year. Or you can become, if you're a big spender and you got the bandwidth, you got the financial bandwidth, you can become what Substack calls a founding member and what we call a producer. Get it. We are our produce. We're wine and entertainment. So our producer for $50 a year, and that allows you to commission an episode and give us one work of entertainment or wine that you want us to cover and pair, and we will do that for you. And you also get a shout out in every episode. So on that note, shout outs to our first 3 producers. Woo! We have Jessica Mason from monsteroftheweek.substack.com. She is a horror author and graphic novelist in her own own right, graphic novel writer in her own right. She does Mary Shelley's School for Monsters graphic novels, and she has done multiple horror and sci-fi novels and short stories. And you can find a lot of her writing at monsteroftheweek.substack.com. Kate Rochelle, who you can find on survivesonwine.substack.com. She is a Portuguese wine expert, and so if you want to know more about Portuguese wine and or just follow her, she also does amazing design work, like visual design work. So you should go check her out for that too. That is some great stuff on her Substack. And last, Paul Kalmkiarian, who has his own wine podcast, Wine Talks with Paul K. We highly recommend going to check out that podcast. He sits down and chats with a new person in the wine world in some form or capacity every single week. That is Wine Talks with Paul K. Thank you so much to our first three producers. Once again, folks, we will catch you next week with another wine and entertainment pairing for your vintertainment. Ciao until then.
Later, guys. Choices: A, Recioto, B, Appassamento, C, Ripasso, or D, Metodo Segundo. So just head on over to our Substack, vintertainmentstudios.com, to cast your vote in the poll, which will be embedded in the post on our Demons or Demoni episode. Okay, WSET level professional 3 Dave, as you like to be called these days. What you got, Dave?
Absolutely, though not on our Demons episode. That was a typo. So you're going to find this poll in this episode because it is this week's thing. So
all right.
So I'm sorry.
We're going to cut that out. We're going to do the trivia question again. We're going to do the trivia question again.
All right. One more time.